This is a song from Vintage Violence by John Cale. Hi, my name is Billy Hough, and this is Things You Should Know, which is when Legs McNeil gives me 3 minutes to tell you everything you need to know about John Cale. It's going to be tough, so I'm going to jump right off. John Cale was a Welshman. He came over in the middle of the 20th century to work with John Cage, Lamont Young. It was the experimental music explosion, basically, out of New York. He worked with a band called the Dream Syndicate. Hooks up with Lou Reed in 1966 in New York City, and they end up forming the Velvet Underground. His influence on the Velvet Underground cannot be overstated. The reason that the Banana and White Light, White Heat, the only two records that John Cale is actually on with the Velvet Underground, has so much experimental stuff. There's the piano part in All Tomorrow's Parties, and there's this crazy viola which gives you that on it sounds like the whip on Venus and Furs, and also on Heroin. So it's just incredibly like persuasive stuff. He also reads a short story by Lou Reed called The Gift on White Light, White Heat. That is one of the first like spoken word psychedelic experiences ever. Lou Reed kicked him out of the band because, much like when Brian Ferry kicked Brian Eno out of Roxy Music, it was because John Cale had a skill set that Lou Reed didn't have, and Lou Reed was feeling sensitive about it. That's okay. John Cale moved on with Nico, who had been kicked out of the Velvet Underground after the first record by Lou Reed, and he produced 3 amazing records by Nico. He produced The Marble Index, he produced Desert Shore, and The End, on which they actually hook up with Brian Eno, and Nico saying, you know, this is the end, and that's all John Cale, which you would not have heard. Like, all of goth music which comes from Nico would not fucking exist. He also worked with Nick Drake. At this point, he started doing solo records. His first one, Vintage Violence, which that song Hello There comes from. He then did 2 experimental records, The Academy in Peril, which Andy Warhol gave him a famous album cover for, which is a series of Kodak slides, and also Church of Anthrax with Terry Riley, which was more experimental music. Finally, in 1971, he gets together with members of Little Feat, as in Dixie Chicken, if you can believe it, to do Paris 1919, right? You're a ghost, la 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 la. You're a ghost. A whole album about Paris that sounds like everything Brian Eno was about to do in his solo career in one record, and Eno has credited as much. Eno and Cale actually would work together on several records. Eno showing up on a couple of John's records like Fear, Slow Dazzle, and Helen of Troy. Those records were this incredibly aggressive kind of rock and roll, especially, you know, Fear is a man's best friend. You know, it makes sense. Don't even think about it. He also started playing at CBGBs. He had produced the first record by the Stooges and the first record by Jonathan Richman and the Modern Lovers, both in the very early 1970s. And then he produced Patti Smith's Horses, which we've previously talked about as well. But all of his records kind of created the entire prototype for what punk rock music was going to sound like. So then all of a sudden, he ends up in 1990, he ends up having a collaboration with Lou Reed, Songs for Drella, about Andy Warhol, and that can't be it. That can't be it. Fragments of a Rainy Season, and he saved Hallelujah.